Hi, this is David Strohmeyer, and welcome to a behind-the-scenes look at the reconstruction of the best of Cinerama. This 1962 compilation, created from the earlier 5 Cinerama titles, could easily be considered a lost film until now. People who are collecting the Flickr Alley Cinerama titles, such as the first release, This is Cinerama, also know that unlike This is Cinerama, the remaining travelogues, Cinerama Holiday, Seven Wonders of the World, Search for Paradise, and South Seas Adventure have all been scanned and composited from original Cinerama 6-perf 3-panel elements. Many also know that the This is Cinerama release originated from the 65mm composite negative created for a re-release of the film to 70mm theaters in the early 1970s. This composite, or lacing of the panels, was created at Film Effects of Hollywood on an optical printer, using an existing 3-panel print as the source material, not an ideal situation. This was the element that Greg Kimball and I had used for this release several years ago, due to budgetary restrictions at the time, as scanning was prohibitively expensive. Now that the 4 other travelogues are restored, several people suggested on numerous occasions that the best of Cinerama should be the project I should tackle next. As some of you know, Best of Cinerama was created to be used at many Cinerama theaters until How the West Was Won and The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm could be released. We knew from Gunther Young, one of the last employees of Cinerama Incorporated, that no negative ever existed on the title, as only a handful of release prints were ever needed. So in a cost-cutting measure, prints were simply created by cutting into the existing print inventory of the 5 travelogues. However, a new soundtrack was created so that Lowell Thomas would be the narrator throughout. Marion C. Cooper, who produced the first title with Lowell, was to serve as producer on this compilation film and was primarily responsible for the scene selections to be used, and it was to be his last film work. John H. Mitchell, a Cinerama historian and collector from Australia, along with his good friend David Coles, were 2 of the folks who were urging me to pursue this project. Mitchell also informed me that he had preserved, years ago, a copy of the 7-channel soundtrack, which he had rescued from a former Cinerama theater down under. These 2 gentlemen are part of a larger worldwide network of Cinerama fans who have come to the rescue on past Cinerama projects I have been involved with. On further research, I had located a picture continuity in the basement of the old Warner Hollywood Theater. This was a detailed description of each shot along with its timings. This document was created by Norman Carlin, one of the original Cinerama editors, as he and others were finishing up the editing chores on the film. Between these 2 elements, I could accurately reconstruct the film. After all, I was more than familiar with almost every frame of all 5 travelogues, having worked on them for the past 6 years. I assembled the picture to these 2 elements at my editing bay, and then we proceeded to restore John Mitchell's archive soundtrack at Chase Audio in Burbank. But something was still not quite right. The picture quality for scenes used from This is Cinerama did not match the quality and sharpness of the footage from the 4 remaining films that were scanned at Image Trends a couple years ago. Here is an example of that dilemma. This is the Venice sequence from the 65mm composite. Notice the quality of the details in the buildings. Here's a closer look, where you can see the fuzziness better. Now notice the details in the buildings of Cairo, Egypt, as I'm blowing it up to an equal size. This was scanned from the original negative of 7 Wonders of the World. Here is the complete Venice frame again, and the 7 Wonders 3-panel scanned composite. So to recreate the film as best as possible, we needed to revisit This is Cinerama and scan from the original negatives. Then the film would have a consistent quality throughout. So with the help of our executive producer, Tom March, we decided it would be more practical to totally restore the complete film of This is Cinerama from the original negatives. Then we could intercut the This is Cinerama shots into the best of to make the film look as good as possible. So I created a budget, and Tom March located the funding. After pulling the film from cold storage, we found the condition of the negatives was quite similar to the other shows. Randy Gitch and I inspected and inventoried the negative before starting the scanning operations. It was the complete negatives. No missing rolls would needed to come from the Library of Congress faded prints this time. Of course, the usual vinegar syndrome and warping was apparent, as well as some mild shrinkage. Also a lot of excessive wear and tear from the many prints that were struck over the years. Splices were often reinforced with clear tape, and there was an alarming amount of perf damage in several rolls. Perforations sometimes totally missing from one side of the film, this having been repaired with special perf tape. This is the bay at Photochem, where each separate 6-perf Cinerama panel was scanned at 2K. Here, operator-colorist Greg Pesquet and Tom March and I supervise the session and attempt to adjust the faded negatives as best as possible, allowing for a lot of flexibility to hone in the final color after compositing the 3 panels back together. Once This is Cinerama was completely restored, we went back to the Best of Cinerama project to drop in the abbreviated sequences. This is Cinerama sequences were not always totally used intact, but trimmed a bit from the original, so a lot of editing to conform to the continuity was needed. Here are some examples of the work done on This is Cinerama. On the left is a raw scan of the B-panel roller coaster shot. On the right side, the scan is corrected with a special barrel warp type effect created in the flame. This is an inherent problem with the 27mm Cinerama wide-angle lenses. If this correction is not used, there will be some distortion at the horizon lines. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Notice the horizon line as it appears as a curve. Now see what it looks like without the barrel warp effect. The horizon bends strangely at the panel join lines. So this correction is essential to add a more natural look to the new 3-panel images. Here is another raw scan of the B panel in the Venice St. Mark's Square shot. I will show you the process for lining up the panels so we have a more perfect overall alignment of the widescreen image. Here is the Able panel, then the Charlie panel, so A, B, and C. The technique for alignment sometimes varies each shot, so each angle needs to be aligned separately on the timeline in Final Cut Pro for the best possible match. On the timeline, B is on top as the primary, then A, and then C. This way we have total control over each panel's alignment and the ability to manipulate the image for best effect. First step is to soften the edges of the B panel by about 12%. Then I will fold under the B panel the 2 corresponding Able and Charlie panels until a complete image is accomplished. Plenty of detail in the background can make this easy to create a good alignment. Here's a closer look. Often I have to do this alignment with an enlarged image so I can see the match close up for any final minor adjustments. In this case, the white blouse and the woman's profile is my guide to a perfect match as we slowly hone it in and then lock it off. Here is the final adjusted lineup in 16:9. And then here is the smile box finished shot. Now as a contrast, here is the old 65mm composite. Notice the fuzziness inherent in the image. And then back to the recent scan composite. Side by side, you can see a big difference in overall detail and clarity. Now, let's even go closer. And then back to the final smile box image. I thought I would show you the flicker removal process we often have to use for old film. This is actually from the original 1947 Waller demonstration film used in This is Cinerama to help demonstrate the use of stereo sound. You can see the aging film has acquired considerable flicker and blotching, much like what we see in old silent films. Using Bohr's flicker fixer, we can minimize this problem considerably as we clean up the other anomalies in the image. I will then experiment in After Effects with this plugin with a few settings until I find one that really helps the problem. So here we still see the problem, and now let's look side by side with the repairs and the deflickering filter in action. So you can see a dramatic improvement. By the way, this sequence was tinted sepia for use in This is Cinerama. Here's a scene from the Cypress Garden sequence with the canoe going by. As you can see, there's a little bit of flicker there too, but the bigger problem is a slight vertical shaking in the A panel. And you can notice it a little better if you look real close at one of the branches or something. Here it is composited, and you can see that it shows up even a little more that way as it jerks north and south. These little registration marks help you see it even better. What we're going to do is take this able panel, because the other two are reasonably steady, and go into Final Cut Pro, where we're using a plugin called Smooth Cam. It actually comes with the Final Cut Pro program. We're going to adjust it slightly so that it will work with north and south movement, up and down movement, because we don't want to deal with anything side to side, because that is, can cause alignment problems. So here we've steadied it up. As you can see, it's a lot steadier than it was. And we've composited with the other two panels. And now we're going to go through and run another program to get rid of some of that little flickering stuff going on the able panel, so it'll all be nice and clean afterwards. And there is the final with everything minimized. The shot seems a lot steadier, and that's our overall Smilebox finished shot. Here's the Spanish dancers, a raw scan, composited. And if you'll notice, we've added a little bit of color there so you can see what's going on. And watch the wobbling going on. It's east and west and north and south. So now we have to do a different kind of steadying. We can't use Smooth Cam this time. We have to go frame by frame and align things like areas of the stage and any reference point we have. That's what the shot looks like in its worst case scenario. Now here's the correction. Some of this is areas of mats that we've created around the buildings, so it steadies it better, and then you don't even notice the problem. It's still there slightly, but it's barely noticeable anymore. Now let's talk a little bit about furnace core. As you can see, this shot looks like it's raining in the shot. It's actually just a lot of neg dirt and wear and tear over the years. We're going to use a plugin called Furnace Core, which is going to help remove a lot of this stuff. Some of it disguises, but it removes a lot of it as well. And let's run the program. It takes a long time to render. A shot like this might take like an hour to render. Here we are in Final Cut Pro. We've isolated the shot. We're going to apply the filter on it as very aggressive. Furnace Core will then recognize and isolate these defects for removal. Note all the white specks in the upper right window. That represents all the dirt within that cut of the passing canoe. And as you can see, there's still a little bit of it there, but it's mostly gone, and now it's a more pleasing shot to look at. Here is an example of panel blend helpers. Notice the overlapping panel areas are somewhat lighter. This is sometimes inherent in Cinerama blend areas. What we're going to do is minimize this with a sliver mat to cover those whiter areas. Here it is activated. How this is done is we duplicate the same shot and layer it on top of the master image. Then we isolate those whiter areas with a cropping mat, and then darken those areas slightly to match the exposure of the bottom master shot image. Let's toggle it off so you can see it again. Then back on again. And then here is the final completed Smilebox shot. So as you can see, it helps make for a more pleasing blend line. As a finishing touch, we needed to recreate the end credits, as the originals had not survived, and what we did have was not usable. So based on a few surviving frames, we had Martin Hart of the American Widescreen Museum recreate this new end credit design in the spirit of the reference frames. So I hope you've enjoyed this look at the reconstruction of 1962's The Best of Cinerama.